All right. Welcome back to the Zero Downside podcast. As always, I'm Dr. Wade McKenna. We're sponsored by moabtexas.com. Today should be fun. I'm looking forward to having, actually, I'm probably more apprehensive because every time that we've ever done an episode that I actually liked, YouTube hated it, Instagram hated it. You can't promote it. We can't hardly put clips of it anywhere other than X or some TikTok, and we'll have an hour and 19-minute episode that'll turn to 41 minutes with what actually is able to stay up. Hopefully, this is that kind of episode, though, where I get to have some fun because we're going to talk with, nothing makes me happier than talking to really smart people that understand, that are really smart people who understand the narrative, how flawed the narrative is. This is a really good friend of our family, of mine, who we met really oddly, right. But I've known for a lot less time than I should have probably known you. But we've known of each other for a long time. And with that, I think that the only way to really put this, Bryan Shingleton, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
I think the only way for me to put you into perspective is that you've been in the right place or wrong place at some really key times in the evolution of the medical narrative.
For sure.
To where you got to see behind the curtain a little bit more than some people, or more than some people are willing to acknowledge or admit.
Right.
And realize the fallacy of some of the Western medicine narrative early on. And what it does is it kind of unravels other parts of them. That's what I think that the recent narrative over, what did we decide to call it?
The safe and effective magic jab.
The safe and effective magic jab. So a lot of the narrative over the safe and effective magic jab. What it's done that I think is so unique is when the other side, and I'm going to say the other side because I honestly feel like it's that side against humanity, right? Like if we're humankind, sure, it's kind of them against us.
Right.
And I don't care, Republican, Democrat, black, white, Asian, it's nonsense. We're humankind, they're the establishment. And it's not just like the establishment, I'm not a hippie. It's the establishment of like that half of 1%. Right. And they control everything and the narrative, right?
And we've had this discussion before, but science is not consensus. Period, end of story.
Yeah, Francis Bacon will roll over in his grave, right, with the way we talk about science. There is something that is consensus, politics, right?
For sure.
But politics and medicine weren't. Technically, science was supposed to be the opposition to politics. Politics is about driving a narrative. Science was about not being afraid to stand alone as the only one right in a room, right?
Right.
Doctors, and this is where I think Bryan has unique over me, because he, Baja Bryan, was the organic shaman, right? like you get to question the narrative and sure, explore things outside, and didn't kind of have to unlearn some stuff. That's what I was going to say. I think that how bad they've overplayed their hand on the safe and effective jab has put a lot of people that wouldn't have been in the same room talking together.
For sure.
And when you look around on your side of a table, how I know to feel good about my opposition standpoint on that has grown, because what's happened is you question one thing, and then you find out it's kind of like pulling that first thread on a sweater, right? And some of Western medicine's biggest proponents, like the poster boys. I'm a trauma surgeon. You can't get more poster. I did.
Agreed.
I mean, other than the fact that I did an osteopathic med school because I loved the more holistic approach to how the human body works, I thought that made a lot more sense.
Sure.
But as soon as I learned everything I thought they had to teach me, I did an allopathic residency and fellowships in trauma because I wanted to be a surgeon, right? I'll still pay attention to how the body works, but I want to biggest. I mean, I did trauma fellowship at Tampa General. I mean, the biggest trauma fellowship. So kind of the poster boy for Western medicine when it comes to doing a trauma fellowship. Like I didn't finish school till I was 34. That's pretty bought in.
Sure.
I think that counts, right? Like I served my time. When you don't even question the narrative on anything, like we just talked about, one of the more common magic jabs that as an orthopedic surgeon, I would make sure everyone had when I walked in the ER. That's the first thing a lot of ER patients get when they walk into the ER with a poke hole from stepping on a nail. Right? And there's not great data on even the existence of that disease.
Right. Yeah.
Right? There are some symptoms associated, but I wouldn't have ever questioned that. That was just part of my training. Like, why would I ever look at something I learned 20 years ago as fact and question it later?
Well, and
right?
Since you were a resident, I mean, you never got to question things. I mean, part of residency is an indoctrination, if you will.
Med school.
Yeah.
Like, and you don't even think that you're getting a corporate-sponsored version of healthcare as your training. You think we're above all that.
Right.
Like the education program isn't being run by the people that finance it. Which is how naive does it even sound, right? 90% of the financing for AMA, the medical boards, the journals are all from people that are all these corporate structures kind of owned by the same people. Right? They control the narrative. And I tell people all the time, people say, well, that costs so much. If it's covered, insurance companies, hospital systems, the equipment companies, big pharma, they don't care how much something costs.
Sure.
Because they're just taking it out of one pocket and putting it in the other. As long, they want it to be expensive.
Right.
Because they want to be a third of the GDP. I think that the narrative has been overplayed so bad because now we have a safe and effective jab that wasn't safe or effective. Right?
Correct.
I mean, unfortunately, you had to hear a conversation yesterday that I didn't expect to have with a patient where someone was talking about third set of treatments.
Right.
That asked when they could get it associated with the bone marrow harvest and taking bone marrow cells, treating them appropriately, using our little proprietary technique stuff, and taking shoulders, moving them around, his ankle that needs fused, that doesn't want to have done. We're treating him, and in pre-op, he asked when can he do that and would it affect what he's doing? And I was like, well, you can do it. And my next question, though, was I kind of sheepishly sit down for a second and say, but why would you?
Right.
Like, what are you hoping to gain? Is it going to keep you from getting it, keep you from giving it to someone, make you so it turned into it was a pandemic of the untreated. Because I can't say that word. So it was a pandemic of the untreated to, if you get treated, you can still get it, but you're less likely to give it to someone. Then they pull back. No, you can still give it to people. But if you've been treated by us with our prescribed formula for you, not something that treats it, but something that we want you to take.
Right.
If you take what we tell you to take, even if you get that, you're more likely to survive. That turned out to be exactly opposite. You're more likely to not
literally
survive.
Polar opposite.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly opposite. Yeah. So the data never met, and it had to be kind of a rolling target, right? Like they went from no one's going to get it if you do this to, well, that now everyone knows someone that did the prescribed treatment that you can't walk into a pharmacy without having to say no 5 times to be able to even just buy my Tylenol. Like, please leave me alone while I get my my Tylenol and my. Now you have to go to stand at the
Kleenex
counter.
and toilet paper.
Yeah, I have to go to. You have to stand at the counter to get allergy medicine. And when the winds came up in Texas last week, my nose has been running all week. And so to get something with the decongestant in it, anything that has D's, right? And I won't take any of the antihistamines because they make me drowsy. So I have to take the one with D. to even get that, I have to stand at the pharmacy counter and sign a piece of paper now because it's so
And show your
restricted.
ID. Yeah.
And I have to show an ID. We have to show. I couldn't send my 11-year-old. I don't know if you know this. You're not around a lot of young kids all the time. I couldn't send my 11-year-old in to buy markers the other day.
What?
You have to show an ID to buy markers because
Why?
people sniff markers to get high.
Oh,
And
my gosh.
at 11 years old, and my 11-year-old is like 5'4", right? And she's volleyball. I mean, she looks like a teenager for sure. But her and especially if my girlfriend does her hair and she has this like beach wave long hair, if my middle daughter, my girlfriend, and my 11-year-old together, you can kind of figure out who's the youngest one. But there's some pretty significant age discrepancy, and Tess fits in. She can't walk in to a pharmacy and get a marker.
Literally. Wow.
But you can vote.
You're right. Yeah.
Right? So that's my big thing now is if you don't need an ID to vote, I just need to take Tess to the polls.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
And I've said it for years, but we are now living in idiocracy. Like what used to seem like dark comedy is reality. I mean,
which is kind of scary, right?
it is.
Because that means someone is making a decision.
For sure.
It didn't happen on accident.
No.
But people didn't get dumbed down. It was with purpose.
Yeah, for sure.
When you, my favorite now is because it sounds so silly, and I'll tell you right now, the first time I heard about it was from, we have a functional med guy that works for us. You met. The first time he said something about fluoride in the water and stuff, I'm like, oh Lord, like Russell.
I was one of those guys.
I think Russell, we're doctors. Like, come on. Right?
I am one of those guys.
Yeah. And now you're like, what?
Yeah.
And now when you do the research on it, you're like, we got to get fluoride out of the water.
I mean, it's a byproduct of phosphate industrialization.
It certainly it can cause a significant amount of neurologic missing a beat. Let's just say that absolute purposeful dumbing down of someone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of childhood health problems. There was recently a federal court that ordered a community to get fluoride out of the water, and a local judge vetoed it. Even after with all the data.
Wow.
So another state on what I used to call the left coast, but it's not even left anymore. It's the prettiest land that needs to just fall into the ocean, right? But that coast, they overruled a ruling to get fluoride out of the water after they showed how bad fluoride was, and they're like, yeah, that's okay, we're not going to do that. There's no the narrative.
Idiocracy once
The
again.
narrative for it
Yeah.
doesn't even exist anymore.
Yeah.
But I was taught that was a good thing. Like, we're going to keep your teeth from rotting out. Right?
What? When I first clicked on it, what I thought was
What pushed you to what pushed you to your end? Because for me, it took COVID.
I was reading stuff prior to that. I've always questioned narratives of a lot of things, right? And so anytime I start researching something, it's like, okay, well, there's always a counter opinion. You got to read that too, so you get real perspective, right?
Opinion anyway.
Yeah. But I looked at it's a localized treatment. So like when you go to the dentist, right? It's a localized treatment. So then why am I putting it in water to help my teeth? Because it doesn't treat you systemically. If that was true, what I thought of is when I go lay out to suntan and I put on suntan oil, should I just drink it? And that was when it was like the aha moment.
Well, man. Okay. So now suntan lotion probably increases your risk of skin cancer too, right? I mean,
for sure.
So because you're putting a chemical on you that's absorbed transcutaneous, we use, especially outside of Western medicine, we use a ton of medicines topical.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the solvents that have been used in Western medicine that have had to help you absorb things have been found to be really beneficial just as a solvent. Because sometimes the absorption through the skin can be really, really therapeutic. Now, for a lot of things, it's really bad, right? Lead poisoning, a lot of toxic clothing. There's people out there now that are so much more in tune with the purposeful poisoning of people that they know what clothing not to wear.
Right. Right.
I haven't got that point yet.
I mean, there's men's underwear now, nads. It's all cotton. As opposed to all these synthetics,
Which
that get absorbed.
absorb transcutaneously, and people are like, "Oh, you don't absorb stuff through your skin." Do you know how many medicine? Like, there's literally a pain cream we write all the time.
Sure.
That's a transcutaneous form, because there's two good anti-inflammatories on the market that were on the market that worked really well, but they gave everyone an ulcer. Like, you just couldn't take it.
Right.
But transcutaneously, it doesn't have much systemic absorption. Works really well, but it's hard to absorb. So they add a little bit of this old school solvent to it, and we can say DMSO, I think, because DMSO is part of that solution. As long as you stay below a certain percentage of DMSO, it's just to help that other medicine get deeper, and it's really effective. Right. And I've been writing that through compounders for.
It's been around since the 70s, right?
Yeah, DMSO, IV even.
Oh, wow, I didn't realize that.
So they used IV DMSO in stroke protocols and treatment.
Interesting.
And the only reason that didn't become the standard of care, I'll tell you who was so pissed. Pierre Corey,
yeah,
who is one of the people on my side of the table now that you look around and go, how did we get on the same side of the table? Right. Like, you're an intensivist, you're a Western medicine poster boy. Peter McCullough. How'd you get over here? You're like the cardiologist.
Robert Malone,
you have an
that holds patents.
Yeah, you have an endowed chair at Southwestern. Like, dude, and when I tell people all the time, when I quote an article, and that's one of the only ways this podcast exists on some of these episodes, is because a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just pull the published data and I'll just go through what's published. Like, here's what's published with high-dose umbilical cord cells for this cancer. I'm not saying that, but this study was published in 2009, right? Especially with high-dose vitamin C. That was the most censored episode we ever had.
You tell me that.
And all I did is just, here's what was published in. Here's what was published for this. Here's what was published for this. When I quote an article, I'm like, some guys, I think it was out of India in around 2009. When Peter McCullough quotes an article, he knows everyone on the title line, where it was published.
Even the names that are like so hard to pronounce.
He's been to the university and he says their name right? Yeah, if I look at their name and there's a lot, and it's from a different culture, and I'm not as multicultural as certainly as I grew up, but at a certain point you're just the old white guy, right? And I'm okay. I get it, right? I mean, but
that's funny.
And so my enunciation of stuff is like, I love big words. I don't like big long last names.
In all fairness, I tell people I was educated in Oklahoma.
Well,
it is what it is.
Yeah, that was one of the things we both had in common really, really fast, right? Is
for sure.
We both, not even Oklahoma, Southside OKC.
Yep.
Right?
Indeed.
Like, you don't get more Oklahoma than Southside OKC.
No doubt about
it. Unless where you grow up is not around anywhere.
Right.
When you're referencing a small town and all the Cherokee words I know, like, I may not know how to say a bunch of names off of our continent when I look at a title line of a published paper, and most of the best literature comes from universities off of our continent because they're not as driven by the narrative. But I know how to say Okemah and Tahlequah, right? I can come up with all the Cherokee names where there's a lot of U's, A's, and Q's in the wrong place. I'm fine with all those, but give me a lot of consonants in a row, and I drop it. That's the old. So I guess I will say the Oklahoma part where you know how to say some of the Indian names, American Indian, which I think we're not even allowed to say American Indian anymore.
Oh, really? Native American?
Native American, I think, is what I'm supposed to say.
Okay.
My grandma would die because my grandma was Cherokee.
Right.
And she would have said Indian for sure. My mom, who, God rest her soul, passed not long ago, she for sure said Indian. But more in Oklahoma, you just say you call it by the tribe you're in, like you're Choctaw, you're Chickasaw, you're Cherokee.
Right.
But Southside Oklahoma City, we may not be able to say all those names with all those consonants, but we got you throw a few A's and Q's or an H in the wrong place. We got that. We know how to say that. But old white guy, at some point, you just kind of stop with me, Peter McCullough, best Pierre Corey story. So Pierre Corey, really smart guy. Man, I hope someone looks up some of the content that he has out there, because you can't get more censored than those guys. Robert Malone, who talked about invented the mRNA patent for a lot of the techniques that were used on this most recent safe and effective magic jab, which I don't know how that keeps us from being censored when we could have just said a 4-letter word. Instead, we're going to give it like 4 words to describe it, but maybe. I'm hoping.
Yeah.
But he develops it, and they came out and said he didn't. That was their first narrative, was he didn't have anything. Like, yeah, he kind of.
You can do a patent
right?
search.
Yeah, you
validate that pretty quickly.
You kind of find him pretty quick.
Yeah.
So when you find a dumb old Oklahoma kid trauma surgeon, and I'm on the same side of an argument as Pierre Corey, Peter McCullough, guys like that.
Baja Bryan,
right? So the organic song. So when you find this group of people, that's what the narrative really did.
Yeah.
Is it made a lot of people, when you start questioning things, look around, and it pushed people together for support. And so when a narrative pushes you together as a minority, it's who's in that minority with you can make you feel pretty good about your stance.
Indeed.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the political realm is now too, right? Like,
agreed.
One of the candidates that a lot of people don't like, when you look around, they talk about he's not diverse and he hates everyone. And my favorite, like, do you see what Cuban came out and said about how there's no smart Republican women?
You saw who retorted on that, right? It's MLK's niece.
Oh, okay. How about Tulsi Gabbard?
Oh,
right.
Great.
How about the governor of Arkansas?
Yeah.
How about any one of his press secretaries?
Yeah.
How about any of his attorneys? Do you see? I mean, Harmeet Dillon. Do you see who's the Aline? I can't believe I'm going to blank on her name, but brilliant. I don't think she's lost. She's one of Trump's lawyers in New York, who I don't think has lost a case yet.
Yeah,
right. Beautiful woman, very elegant. Looks
very
like
articulate.
She's probably in her late 40s and looks like she's in her early 20s, right? And articulate.
Very.
Has a family. They're not smart.
Yeah, come on.
And they're not women. And so that one, my favorite post of hers was, she said, well, apparently, Riley Gaines posted. Riley Gaines comes out and says, I guess I'm not the kind of woman Mark Cuban respects. I only have, SEC championship medals from 4 years and, all these team championships. I'm not a smart woman. So, but I guess he sees this as a smart woman. They put up the Secretary of Defense.
It's brilliant.
Right?
I love it.
And he's like, that's who Cuban thinks is a smart one. I was blown away. Like, I kind of thought of Cuban as like a Midwestern value kind of guy.
Same, yeah.
Right? But especially, I always thought of him as kind of a Midwestern guy, but kind of woke.
For sure. Yeah.
But way too woke to criticize a bunch of women because of their political stance. Like, I would never do that.
Yeah.
And I have 3 daughters.
You're right.
I'm never going to say, first of all, I would never say someone's stupid based on who you're going to vote for anyway, or how you feel about a political issue.
Yeah, I had a discussion like this yesterday. What I look at is integrity and character and people's intention. Outside of that,
sounds like very MLK kind of thing.
I mean, it's
what Martin Luther King said. He wanted to get to the point where his children
where you judge by their character, not by the color of their skin. It's like, has that been forgotten? Like, wow.
I thought it was brilliant, right? Like,
brilliant.
I made my kids watch that speech at a certain point in their life.
It resonates. I mean,
because it's still, first of all, it's elegant.
Yep.
It was brilliant. And people can say a lot of things about MLK, personal history or whatever. Same way they do.
You're right.
One of the modern characters in our history now. Same way they did the guy that carried the torch before him that was murdered in Dallas.
Sure.
Right? If you watch those speeches, it's
powerful
and stirring and meaningful.
Stoic.
Yeah, the values don't change.
Right. And their character and integrity. I mean, it goes back to the core.
Based on, like, one of my favorite, we took care of, and then I'll get back to our point, but funny story about everyone carrying a cell phone around.
Yeah.
Do you remember when the kid at BYU came out and he had to resign and quit the football team because he came out and admitted that he had a relationship with a girl that went too far, and so he had to quit?
I kind of do.
Okay, so one of the more famous quarterbacks in the history of that school, I know, and we have spent some time together.
Sure.
And at one point, I remember looking at him, and this is like 12 o'clock at night, and my wife at the time was like, "Where are you? Like, you said you'd be home by 10." And I pull the phone up, and I take a picture of us together, and there's like 20 Michelob Ultra bottles on the table.
Wow, that's problematic.
And she said, "So you're not driving home?" I said, "Those aren't mine. Those are all his. Like, I'm drinking tea." And she goes, Right. It was true. Like,
that's funny.
none of those
That's
bottles
funny.
in front of him were me. But he went to that same school.
Right.
And I was like, and finally at one point I was like, okay, dude, I have to know, how in the world, if you went to a school where you got a guy quitting the football team,
Right.
how in the world did you say? He goes, man.
What if your breath smelled like coffee?
Yeah,
Is that problematic?
Yeah, it's problematic. But I just remember thinking, I said, man, I'm just telling you right now, like, how did you? He goes, man, I'll just tell you right now, ain't no one carrying around a cell phone when I played ball.
That's right.
He goes, everyone now, everything you do is real time, right?
Okay.
So, but what it does is it makes people hypercritical of things that have nothing to do with your overall integrity or the decisions.
What's the same thing with people searching healthcare stuff, right?
Worse, probably.
Yeah.
Because
Whatever
they're
comes up first.
Because they really, like, you can kind of keep some of your personal stuff personal, but man, you cannot stay off the algorithm if you're doing a search.
For sure.
And they're gonna feed you what they want you to see when it comes to the corporate sponsorship that they function under.
Out of curiosity, how has having a practice changed over the last, say, 10, 20 years with quote-unquote smartphones and patients come in either?
It's dumbed people down.
That's what I figured.
It's because WebMD,
Yeah.
Google search, and we call them the Google being Yahoo, and YouTube really censored, and it's all owned by the same people. And even DuckDuckGo, I used to tell people, "Oh, go to DuckDuckGo." Now they got bought.
Right.
And did I send you the picture of the shirts the other day? I entered. There's some rumors out there of some compromising content involving a candidate. And I searched for that, and the first thing that came up was bad stuff about the other guy.
Yeah.
And that was
Shocker.
on DuckDuckGo.
Wow.
Like, that's how optimized it's gotten.
Well, nobody goes to the library anymore, though, either.
No.
What's the Dewey Decimal System? How does that work? What are books?
PubMed is the only way you're going to find half the stuff that I talk about. A Tor server or Google Scholar. I will tell you that Google Scholar does a really good job of, at least until today, I guess. I just ruined it. I'm so sorry, everybody. Google Scholar does a really good job of staying non-optimized.
Okay.
You can go to Google Scholar and do a intellectual search for something that's not corporate sponsored and find good data and science.
Gotcha.
Not on their parent company, because the parent companies, over 90% of their ad revenue comes from the people controlling what they want you to say.
Sure. Makes sense.
So all those character people we're talking about, I love the fact that we're quoting Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy as the bellwether of morality and ethics. And the first thing that'll happen with someone, no one's going to question the message, so they start attacking their personal life.
Sure.
Right? But one of the biggest things I think when you talk about grouping of people against the narrative, look at who's on that side of the table now with RFK Jr. Like, if you haven't read his book,
Agreed.
read his book.
Phenomenal.
Read Fauci. He does have a book title I can talk about called Vaxxed Unvaxxed. I think I can say it in that content because I'm just right. I'm having to get a shake the nod. I have to look off the camera because we have someone over there going, no, most of the time. They're like, we're going to have to edit out. But it's a book title.
Right.
There's a book called Vaxxed Unvaxxed. The Fauci book, though,
I've read it.
it should really scare people.
Agreed.
How criminal the ownership, even through the NIH, of the patents, where there are people that are going to get paid $150,000 a year for the rest of their life after they leave the NIH because they were included on a patent that was funded through the DoD. What?
That we all funded.
That's our money.
Right. Right.
But they're going to pay that back.
Yeah, I'm not getting a distribution check on that.
I don't think
there's no pro rata.
I never got a tax rebate. I didn't get one of those. Hey, you know what, Dr. McKenna? We don't need that 39% this year, that 14% of it, so it's like 49%, right? We don't need that this year because we're making so much money on those patents that we share that we're gonna call it good. That's never happened.
No, agreed.
You don't get you know what's even worse? I don't get a rebate back on the regenerative medicine side when I save people hundreds of thousands of dollars to the healthcare system. You watched 7 surgeries yesterday. There's 3 of those where we're doing intervertebral disc injections that the failure rate of that 5 years is like 13%. The failure rate, if I had done a discectomy on that patient, and I would call it a failure. You don't call it a failure in the literature if when you do a fusion and the x-ray shows that it's fused. That counts as a good surgery, regardless of whether it made the patient's pain go away or not, or if they even needed a subsequent surgery. It's still, we tried to succeed. We were trying to fuse the patient's disc at 5-1, and look, at 18 months, it's fused. That patient succeeded. That's a fusion success. If you're going to call it a failure based on their follow-up, so what's published is 60% of the time over the next 5 years, that patient has another surgery.
Right.
30% of the time, they have 2 or more, and within that next 5 years, adjacent level failure, especially cervical spine, adjacent level failure at 5 to 7 years is like 30%. So 5-year outcomes are pretty crummy. As if you're talking, but not if you're talking about just making the x-ray look pretty.
Right.
If you're talking about making the x-ray look pretty, it was a success. You just had failure of another level. But even discectomy, which I was still doing, I would have still done a discectomy for a big herniated free fragment until about 10 years ago, because the literature shows now, if we can babysit you through that, stretch you out, inject something in the area to help your body enzymatically resorb that, soften it up. It's called lipoarborescence. It kind of softens the disc. If I can get you 2 years with no weakness, the patients that have the discectomy are no better off than the patients that didn't.
Interesting.
So even the one surgery left that I thought in the back, you know what? That's always worked in. That's 100%. You walk into you have pain killing you down the lower extremity. You got an extruded fragment. I'm going to take it out. And I'm going to do it urgently. The outcome at 2 years compared to the people that didn't have that surgery is no different. So now I don't even do that right away, right? I mean, for me, but if you think about the patients we did yesterday, got off topic because it pisses me off, but the cost of the healthcare system of a 1-level fusion, especially in a Medicare age patient, when you look at blood clot, pneumonia, length of hospital stay, sepsis, failure, infections, not even the failure of the fact that they're going to need more than one surgery again over the next 5 years, not even including all that. Cost of that one intervention is about $250,000 to the healthcare system.
It's crazy.
Or we can take some of your marrow, do some stuff to it, concentrate it down, maybe use some postnatal tissue graft, inject that back in the disc. Cost of goods for that, if it was an approved procedure through the government, would be a couple grand.
Wow.
Or you can have $250,000 surgery that you're not going to do very well for, and you're going to get really sick. All the patients that we did yesterday walked out on their own. No one was in a hospital overnight.
It was impressive.
They were asleep about 20 minutes.
Yep.
And there's nothing I could have done in a hospital to change their overall pain score over the next 5 years that would have not cost $250,000.
How did you get to that point as a fellow trained orthopedic surgeon where you started really looking at regenerative medicine? I mean, how did that paradigm shift occur?
There comes a time where you have to start looking yourself. So I went from a big university trauma program where, you're not following up your own patients. You would see a patient a lot of times, especially as the fellow, you're walking into draped off extremities a lot of times. You just know what the x-rays look like, and you're going to make the x-rays look pretty. You don't know the people. And it's a great way to train because you get a lot of volume. I mean, I did 2,500 majors that year. That's 10 years of a guy's career usually. And you do that, I guess, trial by fire. You learn, and you thrive, and you get better at it, or you just
Get pushed by the
disappear
wayside.
into obscurity, right? But when you move to a small town, because I didn't want to raise my kid, I told my parents when I left home I would never live in a town of less than 1 million people.
Really?
And I finished my trauma fellowship in Tampa and moved to Decatur, Texas.
Wow.
Because I had a little girl.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to raise her in the middle of a big city. I wanted her to be protected from all that.
Right.
And so my parents used to, my mom would tell a story that they would leave Oklahoma City, and when they would exit the highway in Gainesville, they would laugh for 35 miles as they got farther and farther away from those cell phone towers and had worse coverage. But your priorities change. So what happens when you're in a small town, and I was the only orthopedic surgeon for like 3 counties, what happens is you start running into people that you just did surgery on at Sunday school, at Walmart, at the
Local football game.
everywhere. You can't go somewhere in a small town. Like my kids would not let me get out of the car at places like, Dad, just sit in the car and I'll run in. Because if you go in, it's going to take, it's like making rounds.
Right.
And people, when you care about what you do, you get to know them.
Right.
And you're going to come in contact with them because you're following up all your own patients. So what happens pretty quick is you start figuring, you have to get some roundsmanship and figure out that you don't just do the most invasive thing to everyone that walks in.
Right.
You got to get to know people. How much is it really affecting you? What is it worth doing? What have you done first? It changes when you're responsible, and when you're a trauma fellow or big orthopedic groups or big Western medicine groups that are hospitalists, they're corporate based. They don't work for themselves.
Right.
When you work for yourself and you're trying to just do what's right for some person, you'll find out that there's a lot of people that the x-ray looks terrible. But is it worth me putting them through a total knee? I know how big a surgery it is. They're already anemic. They have some other health issues. Just because the x-ray looks bad, hey, what if I just do this and this and I can get them better? So it makes you conservative from a treatment standpoint. Now, are there still a lot of total knees? Sure. Do I still think there's people that need the biggest surgery? Yes. If they continue to have pain and problems, I can get them healthy enough to live through the surgery. Because I had to start looking, when you start looking at surgical complications, especially when you're in a small town and maybe don't have, honestly, I used to blame it on this, and epiphany moment. I used to think because I was in a small town that I had to do a lot more of the medical management than I would have had to do when I was at the school.
Right.
Because we have 3 residents and the endocrinologist and the internal medicine and an intensivist taking care of them. But what I never heard in the trauma program is someone talk about a D3 level, but before surgery, I never knew what someone's vitamin D level was. And what I know now is, because of being a small town, when you go down a deep dive, how do I prevent someone from getting sepsis in the hospital? That was the biggest problem, is I'm going to do surgery in a hospital, and you're going to be around a lot of sick people.
Right.
And then you're going to be in the community, and you're around this, and you're going to do this, and you want to go back to work. So I found out pretty quick, because it's been published for a really long time, the leading predictor of sepsis after surgery is a D3 level, a vitamin D level below 20.
Wow.
So I used, and by the way, you're going to need to put them on vitamin D. No, I need to give them 2 doses.
Those are the same people that get the flu.
Yeah. Oh, it's the same people that died of the disease.
Yeah, right.
So that's what's published. Like pretty much everyone that died of that disease, that really died of the disease, had vitamin D levels below 20.
Not surprised at all. Yeah.
But you know what they didn't have as part of the hospital protocol when you went in the hospital with that disease? Vitamin D supplementation.
Right.
Now, this should not be controversial now. We have a lot of things that we have a lot of data points. It's not like in the beginning, we don't know what's going on. We know exactly what's going on, and we have all this great data, vitamin D levels. So that's what happened. I started taking care of people that I knew.
Sure.
And I have patients, I'll tell you how old I am. Our producer, I took care of her when she was a high school freshman basketball player and hurt her back. I done surgery on her I replaced both her grandmother's knees.
Oh, wow.
I did surgery on her grandfather's back and shoulder. I did surgery on her mom's knee. Her dad's broken. Like, her dad works his ass off. He's like a country guy, still talks, like from Bowie, Texas, kind of Decatur, and he's still working. And you put any X-ray up on him, and you're like, dude, like, what are you doing? There's no joint in his body I couldn't operate on. I've taken care of all those people, and now she's a grown woman, and I took care of her when she was a high school kid. Wow. We have a PA that sends us a lot of patients to Fort Worth. She just had her like third kid. She's in her 40s. I did her. People say, "How do you know Dr. McKenna?" I did her ACL when she was a 14-year-old basketball player at Jacksboro and tore her ACL.
Wow.
I've 26 years in private practice. So my perspective, I've done people's child's wrist fracture and their great-grandmother's hip replacement. So
wow.
That little segment, so
full
when you talk about someone, that's the thing I like best about orthopedics.
Sure.
You get to treat someone, and you get to take care of, because the joint, everyone wears out, everything gets inflamed. So I kind of became not their family practice doctor, because they're not sitting around talking about being depressed and sleep issues and stuff like that, but they are if they're associated with pain.
Right.
And everyone hurts. Getting old hurts. So that kind of changes you if you take it personal. And so, especially when you have every cool toy in the world and you realize that they don't all work. So I got pushed into thinking regenerative, because
Okay.
I worked really hard, thinking the harder I worked, the bigger the fellowship I did, the more surgery I learned, the more design stuff I did, helping with the components on the total knee, designing part of this partial shoulder. I figured the more I do that, the less problems I was going to ever have that I couldn't take care of.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And then I figured out I'm taking care of all this. Like, no matter how much technology we have, some people just can't heal anything. Now, how do I help that person heal something? Well, that was a lot easier if you start focusing on how to help the body do a better job of what it would like to do, than thinking I was going to come in that godlike surgeon thing and change it. Because you're not.
Right.
I tell people all the time, you can, if what you're proposing as a treatment is to change the way the body works, I stop listening. If you say I can augment it, I can get in the way of it, yes. How? But if someone says, well, if you do this, you'll change the way the body, I'm like, you ain't changing the way the body does anything.
Right.
You can either augment its ability to do what it was designed to do, or you can get in the way of it doing it.
Do you
That
recommend,
changed me.
I see a lot of patients with inflammation, obviously, but even things like earthing or grounding, walking barefoot on the ground and getting some natural sunlight. It's part of my daily ritual.
Makes sense to me, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
in the N word, I'm sure we'll talk at some point, the N word, nicotine. You've probably become more open to things that when you're in medical school you would have went, that sounds crazy.
I would have argued you met Russell. Russell and I had an argument. He was in family practice already, so he did family practice. So we graduated in the same med school class, but he got out about 4 years before me.
Okay.
Because I did the orthopedic residency, I did a general surgery internship, then an orthopedic surgery residency, then the fellowship. So Russell's in family practice making money already, and me and one of the OB-GYN residents that were all in the same class together, he would cook for us and stuff. Right? He did her shopping. I mean, he was like
That's cool.
He was like home mom for the cool. Island of Misfit Toys that we kind of had, from training. And Russell was like the center one. But Russell was way more holistic before it was cool.
Okay.
And so he's talking about ozone therapy one day.
Sure.
And I just...
You're like, what?
My eyes were glazing over. I was like, dude, we're doctors. Like, we went to medical school. What are you doing? Ozone therapy? He's like, man, I'm just telling you, if you look at these literature from the 70s, I'm like, for the love of God, dude, stop wasting your time with that stuff, right? Like, the most holistic thing I believed in at the time was like manipulation. Do I think that cervical and thoracic manipulation and the lymphatic pump makes a difference? Yeah, that's why I went to DO med school. I wanted to know all that.
Sure.
I'm not going to use it a lot. I'm going to be a surgeon, but I wanted to know it.
Right.
Russell like bought in. So that was about the limit of my open-mindedness.
Okay.
Until you get in private practice and you find out so much of what we do just didn't make a big difference for people,
Right.
or you got in their way, or someone had a complication. I'll tell you when you start getting more conservative as a joint surgeon is when someone has a stroke or a blood clot.
Sure.
And you did everything you could. They were on the anticoagulants. You mobilized them appropriately. They were in their TED hose, and they still got a clot and die? Wait a minute. Like, I did everything right. Well, but you're operating on a human, and the human body may not have read the book, right? That's we were talking a minute ago. We alluded on the DMSO side. You know why DMSO isn't used for any of that anymore?
No.
Not because the science was bad, but because TPA came out. So with TPA,
Sure.
it's $35,000.
Yeah.
Had a corporate sponsor.
Versus a generic that's
For something I can make in my sink, that's like $10. Like, you can buy, I don't think you can now, but you can, but it's more expensive. You could buy DMSO by the gallon at Tractor Supply
really.
as a solvent, yeah, for animals.
Really? Wow.
So when I was in some, and this is how funny it is because I had forgotten all about it until you go back until that was the Pierre Corey. Pierre Corey's question and everything, and one of the guys that's been ahead of us for a really long time, much older guy, wellness medicine, but like old school country doc, and I think that's actually his title is like Midwestern doc or old country doc. He's talking the interlog with Pierre Corey on and you can watch it, I think it was on Twitter, and he's like, oh, if you're mad about that, have you ever looked at DMSO for this, this, and this? Stroke and evolution and stuff. And Pierre Corey's like, oh my God, like I do not, how in the world am I being associated with all these quack docs, right? And then he reads it, and the guy sends him like this huge, like verified sources, goes through all this published literature from peer-reviewed, double-blind, white paper, elite university kind of stuff. And Pierre Corey said he's never been so mad and start to question everything as he was because of that. Like, yeah, it's okay for me to question the safe, effective jab because you know what? There wasn't good literature and it was never FDA approved.
Right.
But the FDA still has your best interest at heart, right?
Sure.
He was an intensivist. Like, if he should have known, if you can stop and dramatically alter the symptoms of a stroke in evolution by taking a cream, you're having left-sided facial droop, you rub it on the right carotid, and during the stroke, it wasn't uncommon in the published literature for those symptoms to abate.
Wow.
And after those symptoms abate, not have a big, long post-stroke recovery.
Wow.
Because of something that you could buy for $10 a gallon at Tractor Supply. So when I was a kid, man, my mom and grandma would get smarter every day. I wish I could tell them that, right?
Sure.
Missed those opportunities, but I would love to tell them how smart they were. We used to take Absorbing Junior. Remember Absorbing Junior? It was the first Icy Hot, right? And it had a roller ball, and we would empty half of it out, and my mom would fill it with DMSO because we had a horse ranch. So we would take DMSO and Absorbing and roll it where you hurt because I had dislocated shoulders and I had a bunch of knee injuries and all that. And so when I was a kid, football was going to be my ticket, I thought. Thank God someone figured out I was smart, or at least they figured I was trainable. I could read. Someone figured out I could read, and they started feeding me good books. I don't know about being smart, but Absorbing Junior with DMSO, and you'd rub on stuff, and you got better. And I always thought, looking up at the time, because I wasn't without curiosity, and we had access to good books. And you look up DMSO, and it can leave you with a little bit of almost a garlic taste in your mouth because that's part of the methylation of that, converting it to one of the metabolites. And so you were limited on what strength you would do or how much you would put on because you got a little garlic taste in the back of your throat and it was unpleasant. But we used DMSO a lot for musculoskeletal stuff. My mom had bad arthritis in her hands, and she just made a little cream with it, which is what the compounders do now, but they take a military grade base. My mom was using it with like oil of Olay.
Really?
Yeah. And she would rub it on her hands, and she would use it on her face. And my mom looked great. We used it for pain when I was in junior high and high school. Now, when I went to college, and I learned better than to use all those home remedies, right? You forget about all that.
Sure.
Pierre Corey said that he's never been as mad about not knowing. He said, you can't be more it'd be really difficult to be more well-read than any of the people we've talked about. If you go to X and you look up the narrative against the recent hoax played on the entire world, the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of the world.
Yeah.
One of the Bear Stearns guys I take care of said that over 85% of every dollar made since August of 20 has gone to less than 3% of the population.
Wow.
That's never happened ever.
Wow.
So think about that. 85% of every dollar's changed hands has ended up going to less than 3% of the world. Like, that was on purpose.
For sure.
Right. So he said, I've never been so mad as first of all, and the one that he said, Robert Malone, said the hill he chose to die on is when they started saying that you had to administer that treatment to children.
Yeah.
He said,
I remember that.
Makes no sense.
Yeah, agreed.
So Pierre Corey talking about strokes, and they're talking about as intensivist, and so someone took the opportunity to say, oh, well, if you're going to question that, welcome to the dark side, right? Like, if you're going to question that, what about this? And then you look at it and go, wait a minute, have we been wrong about everything? Because they are, right? They're wrong about cholesterol.
Oh, yeah, cholesterol.
So talk about that. I mean, think about statins.
Yeah.
If you're watching this, I'm not saying I'm opposed to certain forms of medical treatment that everyone in the population is on, and there's a huge narrative to put you on it.
Right.
But I will tell you, if you feel crummy and you're tired all the time, and you've torn a couple of Achilles tendons and your knee doesn't work real well, and you ache and have muscle pain everywhere, and you're ever on Reddit, look up the support group for whatever meds you're on. And find out that there's a huge group of people out there suffering with that same thing that are on the same medicine as you are. And one of the more aggressive treatments for cholesterolemia, profound exhaustion, is the most common side effect. Yeah. The oral other versions that everyone else is on, that's not on the new one, is tendon tears, muscle aching, and we're treating their cholesterol because, it's going to put you at less risk of heart disease and a heart failure and a stroke and a heart attack. No, it doesn't. Yeah. Hypercholesterolemia, now triglyceridemia maybe, but it was a very decided on thing, right? So this is where all these guys now are, right? Is when did this start? Because you realize, like, our parents' generation, before the 80s, I think everyone now just thinks it's okay to take pills every day.
Oh, agreed.
Right? Like, every patient we have will come in, especially on the orthopedic side of my practice. The regenerative side of my practice, those patients are way more educated about way more things than most physicians. Talking to you, my patients come in like you. They found me through some other form because we're not allowed to advertise. I can't promote this podcast. Wow. So YouTube banned. We got banned as medical misinformation. I invented it. Like we're talking about the bone marrow catheter.
Yep.
Who was the first person to use the Biomac Harvest catheter? Well, I call it Biomac because my name is McKenna. Technically, it's marrow aspiration catheter because I like double entendre kind of stuff, but because I didn't want to name it after me. But I should have just named it after
you. Right.
But I should have just named it after one of my kids. But the Biomac, the bio marrow aspiration, like, who was the first person to use that? Me. Well, how do I know that? Because I designed it, right?
Right.
And we had an episode of that, and we got, YouTube said we couldn't promote it. Instagram took our ability to promote stuff away. They downgrade our podcast. We get credit for like 1 view out of 10 because it's medical misinformation. And we can't find someone to talk to. We finally get someone on the phone one day, and I'm like, look, who's the fact checker? Like, there's about 5 people that could fact check this. I have their number. Tell me, I'll call them.
Sure.
Like, I'm calling Arterioside, I'm talking to Brian Barnes, I'm talking to like all these guys that have been doing bone marrow for a long time. The machine we use, I don't know, might have been involved in the creation of that kit. I was. Yeah. Let me talk to all those guys. Who's calling this medical misinformation? It ain't any of those people. It's someone on Redbook, right? Like, I got my medical degree from WebMD. I have no problem with that. You may know more than I do about it, but you don't know more than I do about this, right? This one thing, and the things I didn't know, I don't say. Like, it wasn't out there. It was out there promoting it for autism. Heaven forbid you should ever talk about stem cells from autism, but you should do that search on Google Scholar and look up cultured umbilical cord tissue stem cells in the treatment of autism. I don't know. You might search that on Google Scholar and see if anyone has ever done anything with that. I wouldn't say that on the podcast, though. Like, that wasn't what they were fact checking me over. That's not why we can't promote on YouTube. That's not why our viewers, like, we'll have thousands of views on a server, and you'll look at the YouTube page and show like 50 people have watched it, and you're like
interesting.
I got more text than that from patients that said, thank you, I love that.
Yeah. I
have one patient that I think forwards like every episode as it drops to like 200 people on her list, and YouTube will show 5, right? like, and I'm not even being, I'm not even.
No, well, I always said, growing up, there was never a term of quote unquote fact checkers, right? And once we had internet capability and you could share the truth with a lot of people,
especially before they started throttling.
All of a sudden, there was a lot of checkers, right?
Yeah. Well, before they throttle. So anyway, daily medicines.
Yeah.
Before the birth control pill, right?
That was the first daily, right?
The birth control pill broke the seal.
Yeah.
Right? Like, when you're at a football game and you don't want to go to the bathroom when you've been drinking beer. Because the minute you do.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly there's a term called breaking the seal. And the minute you break the seal, now, I'm going to miss a play in the third quarter. I'm going to have to go back. Like, you got to go to the bathroom more.
Sure.
But the longer you hold it, the better you are. That's kind of what happened with medicine, daily medicine. The first daily prescribed medicine was a birth control pill. And what happened is it just kind of broke the seal. Because after that, they're like,
Well, yeah,
so chronic medical care, RFK did a great job with this. That's one of the people I would want on my side.
Sure.
In a battle against the narrative.
Yeah.
Because here's someone that has just been fearless. The fact that he hasn't been suicided is shocking already, right? Because he made most of his money suing Big Pharma.
No doubt about it.
But I will tell you right now, I thought 10 years ago he was crazy.
Oh, I did
because
too.
of his stance on a certain form of medical treatment and the increase in autism. And I will tell you right now, when you start seeing a lot of people with that illness in another country that were there for another form of treatment not available in the U.S., I have heard the story 100 times. My kid was fine.
Oh, my best friend. Yeah.
Took him for the treatment.
Yeah.
They administered those treatments. They ran a fever for a couple of days. They haven't made eye contact with me since. That was 6 years ago, and he's been nonverbal. I called everyone a quack for years because I'm a doctor.
Right.
RFK may have had a lot of great data on that and known a lot more than I did because he wasn't indoctrinated into that system.
Sure.
Right. And I'll admit, like, I drank the Kool-Aid until I had my Pierre Corey DMSO moment.
Yep.
My Robert Malone Vax Children moment.
Yep.
My Pierre Corey, oh my gosh, I see one case of myocarditis every 6 months, and I have hundreds on my schedule this month.
Yeah. I literally said about a year and a half ago, him talking here in Dallas, and the comment about specifically myocarditis in teenagers. In 3 decades, he had seen either 2 or 3. And he's like, I see 2 a day.
Myocarditis between the ages of 20 and 50 was not a thing.
Yeah.
Healthy, active athletes that were all administered certain medical treatments. And oh, by the way, you only experience the symptom at stress.
Right.
So when you see these athletes at the height of performance, or you see some comedian walking onto stage, or you see some politician and they croak in the middle of an interview, or the news interview is doing that and they have that sudden unexplained death.
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing.
No, yeah.
Like that was not a thing. So there's all those moments now. Look at where the takeover started, though. Here's how good they are. It's taken 40 years to become as entrenched as this thought is, right? And really, it was longer than that. It started with, I know you
well,
know
the
this.
television
I
stuff
want to say
too.
something that people are going to, I was going to send a lot of people off the edge. And you're going to know, and we've never talked about this, just so everyone knows. Bryan and I have texted over the last few years a lot. We've talked like 3 times.
Yeah.
Like I've seen you.
That's accurate.
The night we met was at one of my favorite restaurants, El Calabrese's in South Lake, Texas. Great Italian restaurant, Scratch Kitchen. Oscar, the guy that owned it, one of my favorite people in the world.
You were watching a basketball game, which Oklahoma State was playing.
Oklahoma State was
really
playing a basketball
that.
game, and I was really into the game. I was sitting at the bar because I'm a single guy. It was on my way home from the clinic. That's when I had the clinic in South Lake. I would go, sit at the bar, order a thing of meatballs or soup, and have a drink and go home. I'm really into the Oklahoma State game, and this guy comes up to me and goes, "Hey, you an Oklahoma State guy?" I'm like, "Yeah," and I'm trying to pay attention to the game. Well, yeah, kind of. Yeah, I kind of bleed orange. And he's like, "Oh, when were you there?" And I'm like, "Well, I was there in the '80s," and I'm still looking at the TV. And he goes, "Really? I'm from Oklahoma." I'm like, "Really?" Yeah. He goes, "Yeah, like my sister-in-law and my brother."
We talked about high school, I think.
Yeah, I think first you go, "Oh, my sister and brother-in-law went to Oklahoma State." Oh, really? Who are they? Like, yeah. You're like, "Oh," and we didn't even talk. You're like, "Where'd you go to high school?" I'm like, "Moore." And you go, "Really? My sister-in-law went to Moore." I'm like, "Oh, really?" "Yeah, but I'm old." And he goes, "Yeah, because I know you're not my age. I mean, you're 10 years younger than me." And I'm like, yeah, but your sister-in-law, I mean, she's probably younger than you, right? Like I'm just assuming like you're the oldest kid, or something. And because you're not afraid to talk to people, and the youngest kids are scared of their shadows, and the middle kid depends on who they're around. But the oldest kid, like we had to go talk to people, right?
Sure.
And so I thought, he's probably the oldest kid, so his sister-in-law. Yeah, her chance of me knowing him is probably not. Oh, really? Who is it? And I'm watching TV. He goes, "Shauna McKenna," and I went.
I remember.
And I look around because I didn't have my scrubs on, and I'm looking around. I'm like, "Oh, he knows my name." And I'm like, "Oh, no, my name in my scrubs."
He thought I was punking you or something.
Yeah, I looked around. I'm like, "Oh, someone sent you up here, right?" Like, there's no way.
So funny.
Out of the clear blue in Texas, South Lake,
Right,
Texas.
yeah, what are the odds?
That you walk up and your sister-in-law is my sister.
Yeah.
And you're like, "Yeah, Sean McKenna." I'm like, "Really?" So your brother is Kent Shingleton. You go, "Yeah, I'm Bryan Shingleton."
He's my uncle.
Yeah. You're like, "I'm Bryan Shingleton." I'm like,
"Get out of
no
here!"
No way, right? I was like, "There's no," and so so that was the first time we met. We texted some after that.
Yep.
I ran into you again at a place in Trophy Club, another place that I love, Social Oak. Shout out to Johan, the most well-read person I've ever known in my life. Like my goal is 80 books a year. Johan reads 100 books a year.
Wow, that's impressive.
And has forever. He served on like the security team for Nelson Mandela.
Wow, that's cool. He's got some stories.
Unbelievable stories, right? So love Social Oak. So I ran into Bryan there, and other than that,
I mean,
we've texted a lot.
Yeah.
Because we had a lot in common.
Sure.
And every time you see some medical narrative fall off the rail, you're like, "What do you think about this?" And I'll be like, "Oh," right? So we vent. So Bryan knows not to. I'm sure my alerts aren't turned on, because I'll download stuff at like 4 a.m. or something, and I'll be like, and I'll text him, because I don't expect people to read my texts until they wake up. Like I don't expect people, like I'm not, if it's an emergency, I'm going to call someone. But I will text stuff while it's on my mind. Like if I find some article, and there'll be group texts, all my staff knows.
Sure.
Like turn off the notification on any group text that Dr. McKenna's on. because I'm an insomniac, and so I sleep about 3 hours a day. So a lot of my literature search is in the middle of the night, and I'll go off the rail. We'll vent like that, but we never really face-to-face spent longer than a restaurant period of time together until yesterday.
Yeah, yeah.
And yesterday, because it only happened because you've been taught that what we were doing is pretty much really hard to do in an outpatient setting.
Right.
But I think that was the question that I was like, you're like, well, it takes hours. You can't really do it in outpatient setting.
It was so innocuous. I mean, you're obviously phenomenal at it, but it was so minimally invasive and like simple and patients, engaging, and it's like, wow. I mean, I was.
But the whole reason I invited
shocked.
you over was because you were like, yeah, but you can't really do that, right? I'm like, dude.
Yeah, and I
do it all day.
Yeah, literally.
And there's no, like, it's not like there's a big problem with it. And look, I would love to think that I'm, at least technically adept, right? But this is not. It's one of those procedures, and we made a joke about it yesterday. It should look easy.
Right.
I've done 20,000 of them.
Right.
It should look easy. I think it's not as easy to get proficient at, but the learning curve is really short. Like if someone does 100 of these, it should get to be pretty easy to continue
routine
to do it that way.
Okay.
But that's not what's out there.
Sure.
Right? And so Bryan, who's done, like your background is like medical, venture capitalist, surgery center, pharmacies. Like there's not a business model that surrounds healthcare delivery that you don't have on your resume somewhere.
Yeah, or that I haven't at least seen, or yeah. Well, and the irony, and I talked to a lot of private equity and stuff, and they're doing a lot of roll-ups, obviously buying out practices. What they're not doing, there's very few moving into functional, integrative, regenerative medicine, but they all want to get in the space.
Everyone wants to because patients are pushing it. Patients have figured out, hey man, Western medicine's broke. I'm taking 8 medicines every day. We're going to get back to this, people. I promise. I know I'm off topic. That the where broken medicine got broke is the daily medicine thing. And I'm going to bring up a word that because I haven't ever talked about it.
Well, TV advertising too in '93. I think it's us and New Zealand, the only two Western countries.
Let me just tell you how bad that is, and I've never thought about it from this point of view, and I don't think I've ever said this to you. The TV advertising isn't a problem because a patient has ever came and said, hey, I saw this drug on TV. Can you write it for me? That's never happened. I mean, I've been in practice a really long time. Because here's why. Because at the end of that commercial you're going to watch, where it's people walking around the farmer's market, like we're talking about a disease, you're just kind of walking around the farmer's market, there's Ferris wheels, there's shopping, and then at the end, and you have no idea what disease they're treating, right?
Or you're clamming with, you got on khakis, you're at the beach,
you're
beautiful day.
Yeah. It has nothing to do with
I want to go clamming.
You should show the people coughing with tuberculosis to sell a tuberculosis drug or something, right?
Right.
They don't do that.
Right.
They make everyone's these really pleasant lives. They're dancing in yoga class and stuff. And at the end of it, may cause heart attack, stroke, diarrhea, uncontrollable chest pain, anxiety. Oh, and suicidal ideation may be a problem. If you feel like you might kill yourself, please contact your doctor. And people are like, in the beginning of the commercial, like, hey, I might want to take this. And by the end of the commercial, like, oh my God, I'm never taking that, right? But what does that allow them to do? If you can advertise, you're a customer. And so the same guy that talked to me about that, he's a macroeconomist for one of the largest banking system investment models in the world. He said, because we were talking about advertising, I said it's a problem. He goes, it's worse than you think. Tell me why you think it's a problem. Like, because you're advertising drugs right to consumer. He goes, does that work? I go, what do you mean? He goes, when you put a Facebook ad, which we can't do because I'm banned off Facebook because I was medical misinformation, right? So I don't have a personal Facebook account, which my mom. The only reason I even had it was so my mom could see pictures of my kids all the time, anyway, right?
Sure.
But he said, if you put a little ad out there, because we don't spend any money on advertising. He goes, do you have any way of seeing what happened? I'm like, well, of course. I would want metrics, like, the amount of stuff we get to look at in the podcast on how many households are looking at, where is it going, all this stuff. which is dramatically different than the face page that you look at, by the way, that shows there's like 40 people watching it. He said, so if you're going to spend, say you're going to spend $500, how much time are you going to see? He goes, you're going to at least look and see if that $500 did anything for you, right? I go, yeah. I mean, like, unless you're like sponsoring a kid's basketball team or donating money to the gym to put your banner up or put my name on my kid's volleyball team's T-shirts or something. Like, I don't. He goes, right, that's just donations.
Right.
He goes, Big Pharma ain't donating to anyone. He said, when they advertise, it's a third of their budget, all of them. Wow. It's at least a third of their budget. He says, if you're going to spend a third of your budget on that, and if you're going to follow any marketing principles, if your marketing campaign is being run by there's a big push to see what's the best way to spend our ad dollars. Where do we get the most traction? He said, Big Pharma spends none of their money on figuring out what happened with their ad dollars.
Really?
Because they don't care.
Wow.
They're buying the media.
Sure.
They're not buying advertising.
Which is why their R&D dollars are a fraction of what they do.
Because they're only giving you money so you don't talk back.
Yeah.
When you're
that makes sense.
Third of pick a major media branch, whether it's print, radio, or television. It goes down to 9 media companies.
Yep.
Google, Bing, Yahoo, 87% of their ad revenue is from Big Pharma.
Yep.
So if you're 87% of someone's ad revenue, are they going to tell people the truth about bad things you do? Or have you kind of bought the narrative, right? So he says, when we allow them to advertise, it's not that advertising is a bad person. It's against the law for me to make something and just go write a big check to ABC to not talk bad about me.
Right.
I can't just write a big check to Google and say, hey. Now, although on an election suppression side, no one found out about Hunter Biden's laptop. We were told it was from Russia.
Right.
So some political parties can certainly control the narrative, because if they had released that and told people the truth about it before the election, things might have been different.
Sure.
Right? Like, I don't think anyone wants to think that our government is being bought and paid for by foreign governments. And that's exactly what was on that laptop. I didn't say that. You can look that up. You can read it.
Marco Polo report.
Sources. Right.
Yeah, third party.
I didn't say that. Third party verification. And everyone knew it wasn't from Russia.
Right.
And when they knew it and confirmed it, they didn't let us find that out until this last year.
Right.
If I'm writing you a big check, or I'm in control of your ability to make a living, that's why advertising should be against the law, right?
Yeah.
And so when RFK Jr., and I don't even think he's thought of it that deep yet, he just says we need to stop Big Pharma from advertising direct to consumer. But the reason is because we would never allow them to just write big checks to control the news stories.
Right.
So now when they do a news story about pharmaceutical agents and health and the people are dying of this. Oh, but you know what? There's some treatment out there, this revolutionary new drug that you take for your hypercholesterolemia that's going to cause heart disease and stroke. I hate like the Dr. Best articles in magazines.
Oh yeah.
Because people think that that's like voted on by their peers or something, right?
Right.
You just pay.
Right. I've tried to explain that to
advertise
people.
in the magazine. Yeah. Like hospitals do that for the docs, right? Because if you're part of the hospital system, they want
part of the marketing budget for
they here it's $5,000 for us to put you in this magazine. We're going to do that, but it looks like a news story.
Sure.
It's like why you don't go to PR Wire.
It's AstroTurf
for your news.
Yeah. It's AstroTurf.
So you're getting what you paid for, or you better get what you pay for. But with Big Pharma, like, oh my Lord, like that. So daily medication wasn't a thing. And this is the word. Have you heard of the Flexner report?
Yeah.
From 1908.
Yeah.
Bought and paid for by the Rothschilds.
Yep.
Not Rothschilds.
Rockefeller.
Standard Oil. Rockefeller.
Yeah. Rockefeller Foundation.
So the foundation, and he was so mad about losing Standard Oil but he still owned all the pharmaceutical applications of petroleum products, which is where they make a lot more money than a gallon of gas.
Sure.
And the Flexment report was, how do we take over medical education?
Yeah.
And you can trace it to one guy.
Literally.
And the report and study where they started, funded, provide the funding, the buildings, the grants, the applications to teach doctors and start to control the narrative.
Yep.
And it went from being, I want to learn how to do this. I'm going to go spend some time with that guy. Or I want to follow this guy around. Or it went from preceptorships and physician-to-physician education to a book being written.
And homeopathic became allopathic.
The allopathic, the osteopathic branch of medicine was started by an allopath, right? I mean, who was dissatisfied and thought that we need to think of outside the allopathic thought of just treating a symptom.
Sure.
God bless AT still. But that it was that controlled, right? So it's taken 100 years to reach their objective, but in the last 40, and RFK did a really good job of talking about chronic medical care. Like 3% of the U.S. was treated for chronic medical conditions before 85.
3%. Wow.
That was 3% of Medicare's budget. So that's why when people say, well, Medicare's broke. Yeah, but it's because we spend the money poorly. Like we put people on 5 and 6. It's not uncommon for a patient to come in on more than 5 medicines they take every day.
Yeah. Well, and
that don't make them better.
The question I always tell somebody when they go see a doctor, they get on a new prescription. If it's me, my first question is, how long do I take this? And if they say indefinitely, it's like,
dude,
then that's not treating the core problem.
About that because it drives me crazy.
It's like.
Well, but I need it for my blood pressure.
Do you have any before and afters to show me patients that have done well? No.
Does it change the length of time I'm going to be on this planet, or does it make me a lot happier, wealthier, better looking, better hair? Makes the people love
Sleep
me
better.
more.
Yeah,
but does it? What does it do for me?
Yeah.
Right. Like I have a buddy that
improve
says,
my integrity.
He says you've wasted your whole career making grandma walk. No one cares. He said if you can give people better hair, better sex, and better sleep, and more people like them, more attractive, then that's the way that's what a business model should be.
Right.
And I was like, oh yeah. He said, dude, orthopedics unfortunately is your drug of choice. Because so much of my self-esteem comes from making grandma walk. Right?
Sure.
Because I gave up my 20s and half my 30s to learn to do it. So it has to be important to me. That's the problem with medicine. You can't feel like you wasted all that time.
Sure.
Right? But then when you're licensed, this is the freedom you have that I don't, in business too. Right? You already know as a VC guy, on the private equity side, they're the ones that make all the money in medicine.
Oh, yeah.
Doctors aren't allowed to do that.
Right.
Because it's against the law, because I'm licensed and I would like to stay a surgeon. So I don't get paid on a knee that I developed.
Right.
When I
but a plumber can own all the...
Well, a plumber can write off his bad debt
Yeah,
and not pay
that
taxes
too.
on it.
Yeah.
I can't do that. If I try,
Can sell you the fixtures, can sell you the pipes, yeah.
He can actually manufacture that and sell it to you.
Absolutely.
Doctors can't do that.
True.
Right? Like I can use certain products, but I'm not going to use a product at a hospital that I designed and charge Medicare for it. No.
Right.
That's stark. It's fraud. First of all, I think most guys that have to do I think that common, and you'll know, you've been in the operative world for a long time. When I do a total knee, the knee that I designed the instrumentation to put in, Medicare, I think the Medicare allowable for a total knee is like $890.
Okay.
My overhead's about 60%. So that means I'm going to make like $300 or $400 for doing a total knee. I have to see that patient for
90-day global.
90-day global. And while the pre-op visit, the time I spent talking to their family, the history and physical, dictating the op report, doing all the work, doing the surgery, and then seeing them in clinic and make sure they get better. For that, after I pay overhead, I make about $300 or $400. The guy in the room that opens the box, so I get the knee all sized. Okay, I need a size 4 femur, an 11 balanced poly, and a size 3 tibia plateau. The guy that opens the boxes to the nurse is getting paid a $500 sales commission to do that.
And he's doing several in a day.
And I designed it.
Yeah.
The company that makes it is selling it to the hospital for $4,900. The sales rep opening it is making $500. The hospital is billing Medicare $100,000. The VC guys don't want to own me.
Right.
They want to, unless they can tell me where to do my surgery and what knee to use, because that's where all the money is.
Sure.
So that's the reason when they roll up physician practices, it's not because they want to make money on what the physician sees. Physicians are lost leaders. I could make way more money going to work for one of you guys.
Right.
Because you would pay me a way bigger salary than I pay myself. Because you could make me use your knee, your nail, send therapy to your place, operate at your facility,
Yep.
use your drugs, put everyone on your antibiotic protocol, put everyone on your pumps to prevent the blood clot, put everyone on your injectable drug, because that's what they do. Because
Sure.
on that side of an equation, a total knee is probably about a $250,000 hit to the system. The $800, the $900, $1,000 they're paying on the physician side is meaningless.
Right.
It's about controlling the narrative. And I can't, but VC, like you guys, while you're not encumbered with the license to think like they tell you, you're not encumbered with the license to not go make money either.
Right. Yeah. True.
You have way more freedom. I'm always shocked at how much more you know than 90% of the physicians I have to talk to.
But I read all the time. I mean, I read.
Yeah, but you're not afraid that it's not. I think that most of what shocks me when I talk to you is I only recently, I mean, I'm talking, and recently when you're old means sometime in the last decade, but I wish that wasn't true, but that's really true. I'll say, oh, a couple years ago, like 10 years ago, or I think last week, it was last summer.
I do that a lot.
Yeah, seriously. I only recently stopped kind of preaching to the choir when it comes to other physicians. Like the Western medicine, I've been preaching the cellular medicine side, especially with bone marrow aspirate concentrate. I mean,
Sure.
if you look at even rotator cuffs, has a 30% failure rate. If you put cells in it at 6 months, if you're doing the surgery, same surgeon, same hospital, I'm going to do the surgery. Half of them I'm going to do without your bone marrow. The half without bone marrow, there's a 30% failure rate on MRI at 6 months. That's been published since 2005. The half I do with bone marrow, 100% of them were healed at 6 months. The 10-year follow-up was published 10 years ago. In 2014, the follow-up on that study was the ones that had bone marrow, 87% are still fine. The ones that didn't, 44%. That was published in 2014 in the International Journal of Orthopedics. So I've spent the last 10 years, we have to start using, oh, by the way, the infection rate, 6,500 studies published with our little Magellan. None of them have ever shown that it didn't lower the infection rate to almost nothing. It changed your recovery time by more than half and lowered the failure rate of every surgery that we've ever done with it. Other than that, it doesn't seem like a big deal. But you can't get guys to use it. Well, it's not covered, and the hospital doesn't want me to use it. The hospital pays less for it than I do.
Right.
So now instead of the hospital making $50,000 off of your shoulder surgery, which is what they're going to charge your insurance company, now they're going to make $49,000.
Right.
Because they had to pay $1,000 for that kit so that I can use bone marrow on your shoulder. But it changed my failure rate by 30% at 6 months. But most guys still won't use it.
Right.
You don't get paid extra as the doctor to do it. The hospital doesn't like you as much because their cost of overhead was a little bit higher, right? And so every time, but I was still preaching that, dude. I'm academy meetings and so I'm out preaching the gospel of bone marrow. I only gave that up within the last few years.
Okay.
Because I was never going to change. Why would you go talk? As Christians, you're always supposed to try to educate non-Christian. But you don't go to the Catholic Church to try to get them to come to the Baptist church across the street.
Right, sure.
It's not going to work. Right?
Right.
It's a waste of time. That's what I've been doing for 20 years.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And I only recently stopped doing that.
Right.
With other physicians, I can't even, their eyes glaze over when you talk about a peptide.
Really?
Until they get sick.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've been in the room with that. Yeah.
You know, once you're around a lot of doctors, and I know that you've argued with them because you'll text me, oh my God, I was just around this guy and we were talking about infections of
What
vitamin
I think's
C.
basic stuff. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Especially with the recent narrative.
Yep.
Sepsis.
Yep.
Peptides, IV vitamin C. Or give them a bunch of antibiotics, kill their immune system, let them die.
Right.
Or high dose vitamin C, certain peptide combinations.
You know, from a 30,000 foot perspective, you know, what do you think are some of the big things we need to do to kind of fix medicine, if you will? And it starts with diet and, you know, exercise.
Yeah. Get rid of sugar.
Yeah.
Right?
Seed oils, sugar.
Seed oils. Oh, my Lord. Some people just fell off their chair because you said seed oils are bad for you. Wait a minute, what? Like
penetrates the cell. Your
canola oil is good for you, right?
Microbiome, 2.5 year half-life, like inflammatory.
Beef tallow is better for you.
100%.
Right? Our cooking with fat was probably a really good idea, right?
For sure.
Seed oil. Oh, you have to take. They've even hide one now, because a lot of people on the alternative medicine side will start saying seed oils are bad. They changed the name of canola oil.
What, they really? Oh, no, I do know this.
They can list it as something else.
Yeah.
And it almost seems
like
like grapeseed, but it's not grapeseed.
Right.
Because grapeseed oil, probably one of the only seed oils that might be okay because of the resveratrol side. But they list it on a label now as, I'll have to look it up, but it's literally a new oil. So there's no new oils, right?
Right.
It's a new oil.
It's just new packaging.
They changed the name.
Same industrial process.
It was a lubricant.
Literally.
It's not supposed to be a part of things you absorb into your system.
Yep. And ironically, a lot of quote unquote
sounds
healthy
healthier
restaurants.
though.
Yeah, right. Vegetable. It's like, not really.
We're low fat.
Yeah.
Whoa. Low fat's just.
Well,
that's the biggest thing you could do for someone. When let me ask you, when you talk to someone, you got a hold of another lay person.
Yeah.
Not trying to convert a doctor, because I know you like to argue with physicians because we're all so wrong about everything. And once you prove them wrong, like you show them some article published, they're all like they have a religious crisis, right? Like
sure.
They'll stop breathing, or they get pissed, or they'll walk off, or if they're reasonable, they're like, and then they'll start looking shit up, and they'll come back to you with a question about a week later and go, hey.
Yeah.
Don't tell anyone.
But I think
right?
Yeah.
Don't tell anyone, because I don't want to get caught. I don't want to get caught reading about stuff that I'm not supposed to know.
Right.
But what is the thing when you talk to another person that because you're not surrounded by a bunch of morons, right? Like you're one of the more well-read people I know. When you talk to someone, what is the low-hanging fruit for you to argue about? Like what if you can get someone? I mean, because you're going to be able to convert way more people in your circle than I am in physician circles.
It starts with diet, and talking about what do you eat on a daily basis. And it's shocking to me, though, a lot of people think they're eating healthy, and they're getting a grilled chicken sandwich at somewhere that it's like you realize there's 46 ingredients in that of chemicals.
But it's low salt.
Well, you need salt.
You need salt, right? So let's put salt back in your diet, number one. And not sea salt, not like bougie salt. You need salt with iodine.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Like go back to
Celtic
Morton salt, people. Like
hand harvested.
Go back to salt that has iodine. Like everyone needs iodine. Yep. The people that had less heart disease and hypertension have higher salt diets. Low salt diet was not a thing. Get rid of that thought. Don't trust me, look it up.
Yep.
Like I love my 11-year-old. She goes, search it up. Right? Like,
I love it.
I like that. She don't even say the G word anymore because I've just tried to ground it out of my house, right? So instead of just saying, oh, good, because that became the name. Like
what's that Kleenex?
Or Xerox.
Yeah.
Oh, just Xerox. No, make a copy. Yeah. Right. But instead of Google it.
When I say web search.
Yeah. So she said, Dad, search it up. So search it up is now. Don't search it up on the wrong place. Right. Like maybe go to Google Scholar, PubMed. I used to say DuckDuckGo. I guess maybe, but I will tell you. So Tor, right?
Yeah.
Brave.
Yep.
Maybe.
Brave's good.
Yeah, Brave.
Yeah, Brave's good.
So there are non-optimized search. Hey, I think even Apple AI.
Yeah.
So the new iPhone, my goal is to only use my AI program for all my searches.
Well, I want to go
Because my
back to the
daughter's
brick
working real
phone.
hard
Remember
on
the
it.
brick phone? I want to go back to old school.
Where they don't know where I'm at.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't know everything you say to
Or the
it.
bag phone.
Dude, these phones listen to you, right?
For sure.
And so I'm having
Can geo-track you in real time.
I'm having a conversation with a patient the other day about silver. And he's talking about the bank short squeeze, how fake it is. He said he's been in metals, precious metal industry forever and ever.
Sure.
And he's in his like 70s. And he's like, I will tell you right now, like the silver should be trading at 3 times what it's trading at. Like the banks have held it down.
Agreed.
They're in a bad short squeeze. It's gonna, like the gold silver ratio is so out of kilter right now.
Sure.
There's like platinum is cheaper than gold per ounce. Like
Yep.
what?
I know.
And silver is being held, and in the commercial use of silver is like quadrupled. You need silver for everything. It actually has a real use, not just jewelry.
It's an
And he's
intrinsic
talking
value.
about this to me,
right?
and I'm just listening to him, right?
Yeah.
And I get home that night, and I open my phone, and the first article, because I'll go to Pistols Firing, I check a lot of OSU stuff, and so I pull up my phone and I open it up. The first article on my home screen is about the bank short squeeze in silver.
'Cause you're
now,
talking about it.
I'm pretty sure that was not that big of a topic
Yeah.
for 99% of the world that day.
No.
How did that get to the top of my search?
There are no coincidences.
No
Yeah.
coincidences. So anyway, sorry.
You
So
know.
salt, diet,
So, yeah, and
the low-fat narrative is
well, I mean, for me personally,
total bullshit, right?
I don't even eat vegetables. Like very rare, I'll eat. And it's
I
the
wish I liked
protease
them.
inhibitors.
I would love to.
Lectins.
I would love to like vegetables. I just don't eat a lot.
Yeah.
First of all, if you don't eat organic ones, you're probably, you can think you're doing the right
You're
thing.
getting glyphosate.
My girlfriend, like, I love her, but she doesn't really know, like, low carb, low sugar, right?
Yep.
Fat and protein. That's been my goal. I mean, I've
Sure.
had a little bit of a metamorphosis last couple of years because I got really metabolically broken, had some surgeries, I got sick. I needed to not be sick. And it seems to her intuitive. Like you would think it would be easy when you're cooking for someone, because she cooks for me and my daughter a lot. You think that she'd be like, it'd be really easy to go, this seems healthy. And she goes, hey, I made us a healthy dinner. And I'll be looking at her, oh. And she'll be like, what? And I'll go, sweetie, this is all carbs.
I'm that
she'll be
guy.
like-
I'm the food Nazi.
Yeah, but I'm trying to not be mean, right? Because I adore her.
I get it,
And,
yeah.
and she's, I'm literally dating Snow White, right? I mean, she's
Right.
the sweetest,
Yep.
kindest person I've ever known. And so she's trying to be nice. She's making this healthy food.
Sure.
And I'm like, okay, like I have to have at least a gram of protein for every pound of body weight a day, or I can't really stay in keto. And we need oils like fat. So she's trying to buy, low fat stuff, and I'm like, okay, like
Tallow, ghee, butter.
Yeah, butter.
I consume a ton of butter.
Dude, when butter and my kids will do too. Now, not so much, especially my middle one. She's much more of a food Nazi. My older one, because she has MTHFR, like has to look at all the labels to make sure that have folate in it.
Is that more common in females than males?
30%, maybe.
Okay.
So the most common genetic disturbance in metabolism in the U.S., up to 30%, at least in the non-dominant form, probably 11 to 13% in the dominant form of females. So
Wow.
a lot of people that think they have bad anxiety disorder,
It's
if
folate.
they're female, it's folate.
Yeah.
Right. It's unmethylated B vitamins, and we add folate to everything. It's not a naturally occurring thing.
Right.
Folic acid is different. Methylated B vitamins are different. Even unmethylated B6 or B12. It's loaded with B. Every energy drink.
Oh, yeah.
If you have anxiety issues and you're a girl and you're drinking energy drinks,
Maltodextrin. Maltodextrin's worse than refined sugar, but it's not classified as a sugar, but it will spike your glycemic index even more.
Glycemic index higher, and insulin resistance is real. Right?
Yeah.
So I think, but I wish I liked vegetables, but I don't. But now I know.
You like fruit? Depends.
I like all the ones that are bad for you. I like a lot of, like, I love strawberries.
Okay.
Strawberries, unless you're eating organic strawberries.
Right,
I like
right.
a lot of berries. I like I like blueberries, and you know, from the cancer perspective stuff, we eat raspberries and blueberries. That's probably my cheat.
Okay.
Because it's still lower on the glycemic index than I like watermelon.
Oh, I love
like
watermelon.
Texas in the summer,
Yep.
man.
Yeah.
We'll
It's good for your prostate too. The
we have
watermelon
watermelon
seeds.
in the fridge a lot.
Yep.
But no, I try to stay away from sugar, even naturally occurring. But yeah, my cheat is probably berries.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't eat a lot of bananas or anything like that.
Yeah, I rarely eat bananas. I make natural ice cream though all the time. That's fruit based with heavy fat, or do like canned coconut milk, and I sweeten
Big
it.
fan of all coconut,
Yep.
coconut milk and coconut oil.
Yep.
Best health hack that people could have is figure out a way to get coconut
Egg yolks
oil in their diet.
and either honey, raw honey, organic maple syrup.
Magic honey.
So good.
There's magic
Oh,
Himalayan
yeah.
honey.
Right.
Yeah, it's a TikTok thing, I think, right now. But
Yeah. Joe Rogan was talking about it on an episode once. Yeah.
way might be worth the extra money from the nootropic side.
Interesting.
So
What?
so organic. So how do you eat? Like, where do you get your protein?
A lot of beef,
We don't.
and I do grass fed, grass finished. No two local ranchers.
You know, as a kid in Oklahoma,
Yeah.
especially because you were South OKC, I was
eating spam growing
I was
up.
between
Come on.
Moore and Tuttle, though, right? like we had spam on our macaroni and cheese.
Oh yeah.
Because if you baked your macaroni and cheese, a couple of pieces of spam on it, it gave you your protein. Right?
Absolutely.
That's
funny.
Spam and eggs for breakfast.
Yeah.
I can't even stand the texture of spam unless you put it in a skillet, though.
Right.
If you'll pan fry, I think you could probably, especially with how I grew up, you could probably pan fry anything and I'd eat it.
Yeah. I'm
So a
saying,
little,
yeah.
especially if you use gravy. If you make gravy the way my mom did, use your bacon fat,
The real thing.
a little bit of
Yeah.
milk, sprinkle some flour in it, mix it all together. Perfect.
Nice.
You can.
Methylene blue, I experiment with a little bit. I don't notice a lot of difference, but
I know people are almost religious about it. There's some science, and one of the smarter guys I know is not a zealot about it, but hasn't dispelled it either. So I'm not. I don't have a methylene blue product that I would recommend at this point because I just don't know. But that is on my list of things to prove or improve.
sure. I think it's a good one to look into.
There are a lot of people that I did that with iodine
Okay.
and found out, holy
When
shit.
iodine
we
used to
don't
be in our
have-
diet, like right, it's been all stripped. It's like most of the nutrients and
Yeah.
things have been
We've
stripped.
stripped everything of all the essential minerals, right? Like there's, but iodine, clutch.
Yeah.
Methylene blue, haven't. What's your vitamin regimen?
So, CoQ10, acetyl-L-carnitine,
Clutch.
D-ribose, kind of upregulated. D-ribose kind of acts like sugar, but doesn't affect your insulin at all. I do pretty high dose of D3 with K2. At least
Everyone
10,000.
should,
Yeah,
right?
10,000 IUs a day.
That's on my list of if you're not taking this, you're doing something wrong.
I take, and this is only recently, in the last year, I'd say I started taking boron. I do it 3 weeks on, 1 week off, 3 milligrams a day.
With calcium, or you have just a regular boron supplement?
Just regular boron, and significantly increased my free testosterone, like shockingly.
Really?
Yeah, and that was the only thing that changed. I mean, did a blood draw and was like, wow.
The only way I've ever taken boron was kind of it's one of the binding agents they use in a lot of calcium products.
Yep.
So,
And DHEA. I take DHEA.
DHEA is a really good supplement for people that, especially men
Yeah.
that are not 19 anymore. You know, it's banned if you're a Division I athlete.
What?
How about that? So here's how careful we have to be taking care of pro. If you taking DHEA and you're playing pro basketball, they'll ding you.
No
It's a
kidding.
PED. So that's how you can tell if something works or not.
Wow.
Because they didn't ban it because it wasn't safe and effective. They banned it because it is effective.
Sure.
But you're not allowed to be a pro athlete or D1 and take DHEA.
I did not know that. Interesting.
Yeah.
What else is it banned?
All the peptides.
Oh, yeah, I knew
BPC.
Which your body
TBH,
actually
thymosin.
makes, which is ironic. I mean,
Any testosterone, anything that can, the only thing that's not banned that really alters muscle metabolism and helps support testosterone function is, some of the powders like the carnitine and some of the products that have the right corporate sponsorship.
Right.
But they're really important. Like if you're working out real hard and adverse muscle metabolism, you really got to supplement protein pretty hard.
I do take, mainly in the summer months, but I'll take astaxanthin, which is the strongest known antioxidant. Same reason salmon are pink. It's basically in phytoplankton.
Oxidative stress is everything.
It protects you from UV as well. So I'll never get sunburn, ever. That doesn't matter where I'm at. From taking astaxanthin.
Where do you get that? It's just a supplement?
Yeah. I first got introduced to it, I think Joseph Mercola talked about it. And so I started reading about it.
Yeah.
It's like interesting.
And you just brought up another name. So if you want to look up a rabbit hole that may get you banned, look up Dr. Mercola.
He's an interesting guy.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Not bought and paid for.
No. Well, and one of the interesting things, went to a conference where
he's not published in JAMA a lot.
You're right. Yeah. I saw him present 5-6 years ago, but he presented early in the morning, like 9:30, 10, and about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he's still at the hotel, and I knew he was traveling that day. And it's like, you missed your flight, or let something get canceled. He said I only fly at night because I try to avoid radiation. And I'm like, this guy practiced what he preaches. Yeah. Like, wow. And I was flying, like 2-3 times a week. And like, maybe I need to look at that.
That's like it's not nothing.
Yeah,
right?
True.
And especially with all the EMF stuff and 5G,
Yeah.
like man, things. There's a lot of things. One of the fun things, I wanted to do this with you, especially now we've been talking for a while, because I think that I feel like I lost my virginity again with the treating children for a disease that they didn't even know they had. Right. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It was something that could really hurt them. So that the pandemic has just kind of, and I thought I was already the rebel because we're doing stem cells, right?
Sure.
But that's not like, first of all, for it to still be outside Western medicine after 25 years of using bone marrow aspirate concentrate, for this to not be just a part of the surgery, certainly for just a part of the treatment, is the stupidest thing in the history of the world,
agree.
right?
Yeah.
So I don't even think of that as being regenerative anymore. I think it's just silly. But like the list of stuff, like so my daughter, who, God bless my daughters, they had, especially my first two, because I pretty much raised them by myself, and it's just been me and them for a really long time. And they've been exposed to the pulling off the veil of the statues of the conspiracy theory that really they shouldn't even call it conspiracy theory anymore. It's like coming attractions, right? Like when you hear a conspiracy theory, maybe go off grid and look some stuff up and see how, especially like my favorite one, recent, because of the timing on the destruction of some voting centers in the right states sure is country is the control of weather, right, and cloud seeding and all that. And my dad was like, Dad, tell me you don't believe in chemtrails, right?
So solar radiation management. I mean, you can read the published data. Solar radiation management.
The patents that the U.S. government has. You can listen to the director of the CIA.
That's right.
Who was speaking. Brennan was talking about. Well, of course we can control the storms. We did it in Vietnam.
Bingo. Yep.
We caused it to rain where it wasn't supposed to rain.
Monsoons. Yeah.
Chemtrail. Like, even my daughter's like, Dad, do you think Elvis is still alive? And I'm like, no, but I do think the record companies killed Michael Jackson because he was buying a bunch of Sony, and they had to paint him to be in the pedophile because they were hiding their own pedophilia, right?
He even had he had acquired all the, was it the Beatles?
50%. Well, he bought all the Beatles rights. He outbid Paul McCartney.
Wow.
For the Apple Records Beatles stuff. But so when he died, his net worth was like almost nothing. But except for he owned 50% of Sony.
Right.
Because he was going back after Mercola.
Yep.
So Tony, because the narrative they painted him, man. You want to talk about racist. Look at what Western media did to Michael Jackson. With the wacko jacko kind of stuff.
Yep.
Like, if you really want to be pissed, especially if you're a young black male, and I don't even know why I compare I'm an old guy, but Michael Jackson, like when I was in school, like Thriller was the largest selling album in the history of the world, right?
Yeah.
And the guy's genius. Like, it's Halloween, so just so you know, Halloween was last night, and we drive a golf cart around our neighborhood with my kids in it. And if you don't listen to Thriller on Halloween, you're doing something wrong. And if you don't make your kids watch that video on Halloween, you missed one of the greatest opportunities in the history of man to introduce them to what MTV used to be, right?
When it was actually music television.
Yeah, when it was music TV. Like, I don't even know why they call it MTV anymore. But, wow, that's it. But Wacko Jacko was a doll. It was a little ape doll, right? And
I didn't know that.
It was a little monkey with the yellow shirt on. Remember the little monkey? That was called Wacko Jacko. So when they started tagging it, so the guys that own Sony and the guys that own all those tabloid magazines that you see at checkout that trashed Michael Jackson forever and made everyone think he was the bad guy. I don't know. You can do the deep dive on your own. The Ian, the guy don't cancel this clothing company or something guy, one of my favorite, Ian Carroll. One of my favorite follows on all the different
long hair
platforms.
kind of guy. Yeah.
Certainly if you go to, talk about someone, like I was the liberal. I was always the libertarian in my family because I don't think the government needs to do anything for us. Leave us alone.
I would agree.
Stop going to war, and let the states figure it out. Right?
Yep.
Like I was the liberal.
I'd agree with that.
Now I free speech is and no sense. Anytime they're trying to censor you, no one has to censor a lie.
Right.
No, the good guy's never censoring someone.
Yeah.
So if you're being censored, they're the bad guys, you're the good guy.
Always.
Right? You don't censor a lie. You're not afraid of the lie. You're afraid of the truth. So if you're so I've always been like freedom of speech and freedom of the press, and that was not the narrative of my conservative parents when I grew up, right? Because but I think they were very conservative minded.
Sure.
The narrative has changed so much, right? But all the stuff you see, that was all really purposeful. And Michael Jackson was kind of I think it was just kind of one of the first people they really went after and destroyed.
Aggressively, yeah.
Because all the FBI stuff, like they went through like all of his phones, all of his computers, all of his stuff. Like if they were going to find something, they would have found it.
100%.
But you know what? They didn't.
Yeah. True.
They didn't find anything.
True.
Like you can pull, and you know how I know that? Because you can pull up the FBI files and look, and they shows everything they went through, and there's no pictures. He didn't collect stuff. You know where there is though?
Yeah, I do.
There was a laptop recently, 3 actually.
Yep.
But there's actually a laptop recently. Like if you look that up on not an optimized server and look at the pictures on that, it's disturbing.
Yeah. Well,
so my favorite was the Michael Jackson thing and weather control.
Yeah.
Because those are the two.
Weather
that
Modification Act of 1978. You can go read it. I mean,
but that's the thing that makes me seem like that. That's the craziest thing that I know is probably. It used to be my favorite because we were in Dallas, right? My favorite was the assassination of JFK.
Sure. I knew 2 people that were there that day. One's deceased now, one's still alive. And they both of them were dead sure there's more than one shooter.
I'm pretty sure at this point that the person they blamed it on wasn't even on the 6th floor.
Agreed.
I mean,
agreed.
According to someone that's seen that file, there's a picture of him in like the doorway.
Yeah.
Right. So but that's not even. But that's where the term, just so you guys know, that's where the term conspiracy theory came from. And you know who thought that up? The CIA to cover their tracks. So they started calling everyone, "Oh, it's a conspiracy theory." If you come up with a narrative, that's what the bad guys do.
Sure.
They package it and give it a slam, right?
You're a physician. You understand Latin. Conspirare means to think or breathe together. Yeah. So in theory, every weekend, college football teams are conspiring. It isn't necessarily something nefarious.
You're always conspiring
think and
to
breathe.
do something correct.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You have to, that just means you're thinking about it. Well, I don't think you should do much that you don't think about. Now, I will tell you that being being an adult male, I think there's plenty of guys do that they don't think about. But
Sure.
if you think about the ramifications of your action, it's a lot easier to do the right thing. That's
Always.
why it's uncommon.
Yeah.
But
Well,
good point.
I have a saying, half truths become full lies.
Oh, for sure. But I mean, we have some really good role model truth tellers out there right now.
For sure.
Again, one of those things that I used to not like. I used to not like some of the guys that I follow the closest now, because I thought they were just so like, why are you wasting all this time talking about that? But so my favorite conspiracy probably used to be JFK.
Okay.
But I think so many people in the world now just know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
oh, come on, right? So one guy, oh, and by the way, it just happened to be the same month that JFK was removing the protection away from a foreign group that spends a lot of money altering U.S. elections. He was going to remove their tax status.
Yep.
He was going
As a foreign agent. Yeah.
He was going to bring down the military-industrial complex and break apart the Fed Reserve.
Yep.
So the guy that came up with all these great ideas just happened to die of a random gunman that was really well trained and could do something that even an expert marksman can't do, as fires follow that many shots from a single bolt action gun that fast.
Right.
Okay. All right. Okay. But just the timing. You said it a minute ago. There's no such thing as a coincidence.
Yeah.
And so, just based on timing alone, come on, no one's that silly, right?
The book Counterpoint, Jim Marrs wrote, and Jim Marrs was
he's the one that did the movie, right?
Well, so the first Oliver Stone movie was basically based off his book.
Of his book.
But he was a reporter for the Star Telegram, young guy back then. He passed, I think, in 2018.
Wasn't he
got
in
to
the
meet him
room when they shot Ruby?
That sounds right.
Wasn't he like in the parking garage when they shot Ruby?
But Counterpoint, the book Counterpoint, covers a lot of stuff that people have never looked at specific details. It's just shocking, and it's like, wow. And you want to dig into something interesting?
Writing the Warren Report, right?
Yeah.
So let's list them in order. Let's get this episode completely canceled, right? Let's see if we can bring down all the medical information I've worked so hard to get out there. So I do think that our government probably had something to do with the murder of a president. So I think, and look, I don't think it's far-fetched, because we certainly have murdered a lot of other leaders all over the world. You don't have to do a very deep dive on books recently published by ex-CIA, FBI, NSA.
We saw, he died. We've all seen that video, right?
Yeah.
I mean.
So I don't think so if we were done it to other leaders, do you think ours was safe?
Right.
No, right? So that's probably the most famous, because that changed. That's why the Fed is still the Fed, which is not a federal, by the way. The Federal Reserve has nothing to do. They have no reserves, and they're not sponsored by our government. They're privately held banks.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and he was going to get rid of that. And he was going to get rid of the CIA, because he said we shouldn't be spying on us. Oh, how about the fact that we don't spy on Americans, but the director of our CIA, NSA. So that's why Julian Assange, that's why my favorite is someone we still, God, I don't even think we can say his name on the podcast either. But his first name was Edward, and he wasn't in a Twilight movie.
That's good.
So his name was Edward, and he wasn't in a Twilight movie. I bet that comes up if you search it up. So that, he told us then that they're listening to everything you say. They're spying on us, right? That should have mattered to people.
100%.
Right? It did. It did to the president that was murdered.
Sure. 100%.
Regardless of who shot him, it really mattered to him.
Yeah.
And you know who else it really matters to? His nephew.
Yeah.
Whose dad was also murdered.
Right.
Because of the same thing, because his dad was the AG, and that was a pretty dynamic team between JFK and RFK Sr. Like, that was going to change a lot of things. And I think that the military-industrial complex may have had something to do with that, right? Yeah. So that if that's the top of all time, I think the next one, what's your number two? Because my number two is really easy.
Is it?
Yeah. My number 2 is really easy. And it's one of those things that I have to be careful even looking stuff up, because it will dominate my thought, because it was because it's such a worldwide event. Like I wasn't old enough to know where I was when JFK was shot.
Okay.
But I am old enough to know where I was when this happened.
Oh, yeah. We're on the same page.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So a famous day in September.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
When Epstein, look up paintings in Epstein's apartment in New York, when they raided his apartment, there's 2 really famous paintings painted by the same artist.
Yep.
Look up both of them.
There you go.
One of them has someone sitting on the ground playing with a couple little paper airplanes and 2 Jenga towers on the ground.
Literally, yeah.
Look up Building 7.
Yeah. When that discussion comes up, and I'm always shocked at people that go, well, what's that? I'm like,
do you don't remember the one that fell 8 hours after all the planes were down already? Like, just for no reason?
Yeah.
Look at what was in there. Oh, come on.
Pull it.
So those are the big 2, because those are the most life-changing for me. Even though I wasn't around for the JFK, my parents, that was the thing of the baby boomers, right? Yeah. That's the one thing you can say. Where were you? There's 3 times. Where were you when?
How about Gulf of Tonkin?
Before me.
Same, but I mean that's a biggie.
But no, because our government did it.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the first false flag event?
Probably not, but first
big one, right? Because it wasn't called a false flag event back then,
right?
Like no one did that. Like there was no straw man, there was no false flag.
Yeah, I mean,
obviously, if Gulf of Tonkin was one, the September date was another.
Yeah,
may have been. I mean, those would be 2. That's the same thing. Right?
It is. Yeah.
It was to get us to do something that the people would have not wanted us to do.
Sure. Yeah, I question everything, including myself. It's like the guy I'm going to brush my teeth with that I see in the mirror. Got to keep them sharp, right?
Man, I told you before, just so you guys know, before we start, because my daughter's doing all the mics, and I'm really bad about maintaining the right distance from the mic and the sound check stuff, and I always pound on the desk, and so I get yelled at by my daughter all the time. So there's a little bit of time that we get to sit and talk. I told you, and I meant it earlier when I said that it's really only in the last few years I've even started to like me, right? So I mean, it took me, because you take so much time to get the education part done, and then you're trying to start a practice and raise kids, and I just got so broken, and I was sick, and you start making. I didn't function much as my conscious self, even though the books that were kind of the foundation of why I got an education, like the Stoic literature, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Zeno, Epictetus.
Marcus Aurelius, yeah,
meditations, right? So that was probably some of the old stuff. As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, written in 1889. Really short, easy read book. Now there are some longer versions, which is odd, but Magic of Thinking Big, like 1929 by Schwartz. Zig Ziglar, See You at the Top. I mean, I had a librarian, which was a good place to hide if you were a smart kid but didn't happen to go to class. I had a librarian that would just feed me
that's cool.
This classic literature, and it's definitely why I was able to go to school. It's definitely what got me in college. It's for sure what got me to the point where I could take an MCAT and go to medical school.
Right.
And the Stoic principles are for sure what made me, because Stoicism, I tell people all the time, it's the only real form of philosophy that doesn't impair your ability to be a monotheist. Right. So yep. I think of myself as a monotheist. I'm a Christian, and I think that the monotheist philosophies is really congruent with Stoicism. And if someone's not believing God, but they have a Stoic mentality, they're still going to be, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen to them when they die, but they're still going to be a really good person, right?
Sure.
So I don't think someone has to believe everything I do to be a good person. But I think someone that focuses on Stoic principles, I'm probably going to have a lot in common with, and I wouldn't mind them being around my kids.
Right.
right?
That
And
makes
so
sense.
Stoicism, just accountability, the caring of doing the right thing. So some of the Marcus Aurelius comments about just doing the definition of integrity is doing the right thing even when no one's looking, right?
Right,
Like that's almost a direct passage from
Doing the right thing, not for
Meditations.
personal gain. I mean,
Looking at yourself in the mirror, what you just said, right? Like that's very Marcus Aurelius. So those kind of books. But I got away from, I got too busy to read. I had some pretty significant crisis moments as an adult when you should be grown up enough to not have those, and kind of with some introspection, counseling with talking to a lot of really smart people, and a lot of reading the literature that really gave me the basis to even be who I am.
Sure.
Kind of feel like for the first time over the last 5 years, really is the first time I've even started to like myself again.
wow.
So it took a lot, right? I had to kind of fix myself, but I will tell people talking about conspiracy and everything is fun, but probably on the health side of what we do, reading is for sure one of the things that if you really want to keep yourself mentally clear and focused, you gotta read, and not
Agreed.
off a phone.
Well, then you're getting blue light. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole
The
nother.
whole blue light phone thing, that's real. Like if you
Absolutely.
if the last thing you do at night is you're looking at your phone, and the first thing you do in the middle is looking at your phone, especially as you get older, if you're in your 20s, your brain can take a lot of badness and still be okay. You have a lot of neuroplasticity. You're turning over cells a lot. Man, as you get older, you just need to not, right? Read a book.
Yeah.
Um,
And I love having a book in my hands.
I like the physical feel of a book.
Yeah.
And
dog earing,
Yeah, I want it to bend.
highlighting,
I want it to bend when I shake it. I want to, and I like to highlight stuff. And that is probably one of the things I'm just, God, man, if you can, when you look at what your kids do and you see it came from you and it's something good, you're just like,
nice. Yeah.
So one of the things I've always done, because books have always been important to me, was give people books. Especially if they're going through certain crisis moments, or I've read something I thought was helpful for someone, and I'm never giving everyone the same book, but I'll write in it. And my oldest and my middle both, in the last couple of years, I've seen them both give people books that they've written in for certain things, and it's just one of those
Cool. That's cool.
he shoots, he scores kind of moment, right? That's because I'm a big, most people that know me for very long, especially if they've been through anything, have gotten a book from me at some point.
Nice.
That I've written in.
Yep.
Just because I've never given someone a book I haven't read.
Same.
So it makes me
same,
hold myself
same.
accountable, right? Like we've talked about, I still have to read what's the Monk in the Ferrari?
Yeah. So the monk that sold his Ferrari.
Monk has sold his Ferrari. I saw it.
Phenomenal.
I
phenomenal.
wrote it down yesterday and was going to buy it last
The
night.
Spirit
and forgot.
Molecule, Dr. Rick Strassman, MD. You got to read that.
Because we were talking about other health alternative things.
Yep.
And I haven't read Spirit Molecule yet, but I did read the old Timothy Leary book.
Oh, yeah.
And I will tell you that, especially when you talk to a lot of patients that had to seek alternatives, I'm a big fan.
Sure.
Ayn
Rand, did you read Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged?
Oh God, Atlas Ayn Rand is.
I love Fountainhead. Atlas Shrugged. It's a challenging read.
It's a challenging
but it's so
read.
different than, in my opinion, all her other stuff.
Yeah.
We the People. Blah blah blah.
Ayn Rand is hard.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things I felt like it was.
Fountainhead, though, is my favorite book that she wrote.
Atlas Shrugged, I will tell you, I beat myself into because
Same.
one of my favorite people, one of the co-residents with that was his favorite book, and I'd never read it, and we were residents, and I just remember thinking, I'm going to read your favorite book.
Right.
I really didn't like him for about a month. I was because it was painful.
Oh yeah, agreed.
It's a bit. It's like my girlfriend. She said her favorite book was Anna Karenina, and I'm like.
Really?
Russian tragedy, that's your favorite book, but she was like, but that's what she thought was smart, right? Like Russian literature. I was like, it's a 800-page long suicide note.
It's like reading War and Peace.
Yeah, did I read it?
Yeah.
Am I happy I read it? I don't know, man. I here's what I do now. I am not afraid to start a book and not finish it. That's been very liberating. If I'm halfway through a book and I'm not getting something out of it, if it's not fitting, I don't mind. And I will read 3 or 4 books at one time. I'll have one book in the living room, one book in my car, one book in my backpack, one book sitting by where I sit.
If it doesn't bring value, I mean, what's the point?
And I don't really even hardly make time for nonfiction anymore.
Same.
Which is probably
Which is ironic that I like The Fountainhead because totally fiction, But
I have not read it.
Yeah.
But Atlas Shrugged, that's almost like a test of manhood. Like,
you ever read?
You know what I just got in the mail yesterday? My kid made fun of me for it because
This is going to be good.
Yeah, because I ordered the study guide with it.
Oh no, this came up.
Modern Man's Search for a Soul.
That's right, with the study guide.
With the study guide, and only because someone was talking about it, and I just remember thinking, oh my God, Carl, young. Like I have a degree in psychology, right? Like I haven't studied that since college, and I remember it being pretty foundational for me, really. And I was like, I haven't read that in 40 years. Like, and I'm going through Amazon or something, and I was like, saw it, and I'm like, I'm getting that. And then it had the study guide. I'm like, I'm getting the study guide. And the mail came the other day, and my daughter's over packing. She goes, Dad, young? I'm like, yeah. And she goes, with the study guide? She goes, are you in college? And I was just like,
did you order some highlighters too?
I always have highlighters.
Wait a minute. Let's go back to earlier discussion, the not being able to buy markers at the pharmacy.
Yeah.
Were you getting highlighters early?
Sharpies. Sharpies, right? So I get highlighters and Sharpies. Because we have a lot of pro athlete stuff, and I like, I would rather have a picture that you signed of us together, or a jersey or a shoe, than you putting $10,000 in a than handing me silver or something, right? Like I like moments.
Yeah, same.
Right? Memorabilia to me, those are life moments for me, and my kids may throw all this stuff away someday.
Yeah,
but I bet they don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's some books in my shelves that I know my daughters. One of them is going to take all of my medical book stuff. One of them is going to take like my copy of the Constitution stuff, all that.
I've got that.
I know which daughter's probably going to want what books. I don't think my youngest is going to care about any of that, but she'll want my football stuff.
Yeah.
Right, probably. But I think the memorabilia to me means a lot more. So I have a lot of Sharpies everywhere.
That's funny.
But that's why. Like I don't use a Sharpie. I do write with the Sharpie in every book I give to someone.
That makes sense.
Instead of a regular pen.
Sure. I like that.
Right. I know this is really long, so it's probably going to end up being some intermission breaks on this, and so hopefully they'll cut this into some usable format, and maybe we can keep some of this up. That'd be fun. I really want, and fortunately we weren't doing this real early in the morning where we couldn't have got a little bit of mental lubrication. We're not stuck in a workday mode, but this kind of discussion, we need to do this sometime where we don't even talk medicine, but we start going through the list because you have more random knowledge on how the fallacies of what should be thought of by most people as principled Western medicine, how wrong they've been and how wrong they are and how much they're wrong about,
right,
than 90% of any physician you're going to talk to. And you've read the articles, you know the background, and you read the book by the guy that came up with the article. And for me, it's very liberating. It feels like someone is
validation.
Yeah, it feels like someone's supporting my bad habit, right? It's like hating the fact that I drank Coke, but living in Atlanta, right? Like where I have to pass 5 places that serve Coke. It's like,
sure.
Like if you don't like French fries, you don't live next to a McDonald's, right? And
that's kind of how that works.
Having you in my life a little bit right now it's not helping my kid's case against the conspiracy part of me for sure, right?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it makes me
guilty.
It makes me happy. So I want to say thank you to everyone. I appreciate you turning in. As always, I appreciate the trust and time our patients give us. And with that, I'm going to let Bryan kind of say anything he has to say, because I know we kind of dominated the conversation.
No, I always enjoy time with you, and just sharing brain trust. I'm a big believer of
finish out with your, because I'm anxious too, because I'm going to have to get a pen because you came up with 2 things that aren't on my list. What's your
Every-
best healthcare hack?
So
Vitamin regimen. We
vitamin,
coach you
yeah,
can for everybody.
eating clean, but it's challenging yourself every day, whether that's physical, whether it's mental, and learning something new every day. Sharpen the saw. And I do at the end of the day, did I learn something new? And if not, I need to go do a little reading or something, and make a difference in somebody else's life. So,
I will tell you something that everyone needs to know about Bryan, because you're going to think that because he's a really pretty boy, and pretty smart guys are kind of not thought of as the sweet personality kind of people. He has a puppy that when you start talking about sweet soft sides of someone, that's Bryan. So that may tell you as much about him.
First girl dog I ever had. She's a rescue, but Miss Roxy, she rescued me.
See, now everyone is going to love
Bryan.
Every girl in the room right now just went, right? Like they didn't do that when they saw him already, but sure. Thank you, everyone. And I hope you got some content to find out kind of, hopefully we stimulated to look something up. Right. I hope someone looks up McCullough, or Dr. Mercola, or Pierre Corey's freak out over DMSO. Like I hope there's some moments like that for people.
Likewise.
So again, thank you so much.
Thanks.